Zara Marx, the newly wedded wife of Max Morris, second in command of one of the world's largest airlines, sat in first class, her baby nestled in her arms. She wasn't just any passenger. She had power, status, a life of privilege. Or so she thought. Then the slap came. The sound was like a thunderclap in the quiet cabin. It rang out, sharp and cruel, leaving Zara stunned, her cheek burning as the chief flight attendant stood over her with a look of contempt. But Zara didn't react to the sting. Her eyes were locked on her baby. His breath was shallow, rapid. His tiny body quaked in her arms, his lips turning blue. Zara's mind went into overdrive, but her hands were steady. Max's medical lessons came flooding back. She had to save him. And just as she got her baby breathing again, a voice broke through the tension, loud and venomous from across the aisle. "You don't belong here." The flight attendant stood by, watching as the racist remarks from a nearby passenger cut through the air like a blade. This was only the beginning. Engines filled the cabin, vibrating through the polished walls of first class. Zara sat with her baby cradled in her arms, the world around her seeming to slow as she watched him. The pressure in the cabin mounted with every inch the plane climbed, but it wasn't the altitude that caused her to panic. It was the change in her baby's breath. At first it was subtle, an irregularity in his gasps. But within moments, the severity of the situation hit Zara like a shockwave. Her baby's tiny chest heaved in distress, his lips turning blue. The familiar weightlessness of the plane's lift seemed to crush the air out of him. The force of gravity was too much for his small body, struggling to adjust. Zara's heart raced, but she didn't panic. She couldn't. Not now. She remembered the lessons her husband had shared with her back when he was an intern in medical training. Simple techniques meant to help stabilize and keep someone alive in critical situations. He had always been meticulous with his knowledge, and now it was her turn to apply it. She gently positioned her baby, rolling him carefully to one side, her hands shaking only slightly as she found the brachial artery, pressing firmly on it to encourage blood flow, preventing a drop in pressure. She could feel his pulse weak beneath her fingers. Zara's breath came in shallow bursts as she moved quickly, her instincts guiding her as she used a medical liquid. A mild saline solution from the first aid kit in her bag, a mixture her husband had taught her to use in emergencies to flush the throat and help clear any blockages. She whispered softly to her baby, urging him to calm, and gently pressed the solution into his throat. A series of violent coughs followed, and with one final, heartbreaking heave, the baby vomited, staining the pristine seat in front of them. The passengers closest to Zara flinched at the sight, but it didn't matter. The moment the baby expelled the liquid, his breathing stabilized and his color returned. Zara leaned back into the seat, her chest heavy with relief as her baby's quiet breaths filled her ears. He was going to be okay. The passengers around her began to take notice. A few murmured nervously, glancing at each other as Zara wiped her baby's face, trying to calm him. The first flight attendant, a woman in her 30s with dark brown hair tied in a neat bun, appeared at Zara's side. She looked alarmed but quickly composed herself. "Is everything all right?" the attendant asked gently, her voice soft and comforting. She crouched beside Zara, assessing the situation. "My baby just..." Zara started, but she couldn't find the words. The gravity, and what he ate before the flight. She tried to explain, her voice steady but tinged with the exhaustion of the moment. He was choking. "I need a liquid, a saline solution, something to help him clear his throat and throw up." The flight attendant nodded quickly, her eyes scanning the surrounding first-class passengers who were now watching with a mix of curiosity and concern. She reached for the first aid kit, her hands precise, and pulled out a small bottle of saline solution. Zara gestured to her baby, and the attendant wasted no time in pouring a small amount onto a clean cloth, handing it to Zara to wipe his mouth. The attendant's calm, professional demeanor was a stark contrast to the tension around them. As the baby finally settled into a more peaceful state, Zara looked up, her eyes meeting the attendant's with gratitude. "Thank you," Zara said softly, still cradling her baby. "You helped more than you know." The flight attendant smiled, nodding. "It's my job. Just glad he's all right now." She straightened up, glancing around to make sure no one else was in immediate distress. But in the midst of it all, one passenger caught Zara's attention. A white man in his 50s, sitting a few rows ahead, had been watching the whole time, his face contorted in disgust. He muttered something under his breath, loud enough for Zara to hear. "Animals like you don't belong in first class." Zara froze. The words stung more than the slap from earlier, a reminder of the biases that still permeated every inch of society. But her focus remained on her baby, now calm, breathing easily again. She didn't let the man's words get to her, not yet. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Zara exhaled, still in shock from the chaos, but thankful. Her baby was safe, for now. Just as the tension seemed to die down, the chief flight attendant, a stern woman with a cold expression, appeared in the aisle. She'd heard the commotion, and her eyes scanned Zara and the first attendant with a look of authority. The racist passenger, unable to contain his disgust, stood up abruptly. He pointed a finger towards Zara and her baby, his voice rising. "This is ridiculous. There's no reason a woman like that should be in first class, let alone bringing her baby into this cabin. You should be doing something about this." The chief flight attendant stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her tone dismissive, clearly already siding with the passenger. The first attendant stood her ground, but her voice wavered. "She's just a mother trying to calm her baby. There's no need for escalation." But the chief flight attendant was already shaking her head, not hearing the first attendant as she looked at Zara with contempt. "Get up. You're making a scene in my section. Move her back to economy." The room fell silent. Passengers, who had been clapping in relief when the baby was stabilized, now exchanged nervous glances. A few people spoke in hushed whispers, some agreeing, some unsure of what was really going on. But Zara, calm in the face of the growing tension, simply looked up at the chief flight attendant, her eyes unwavering. She could feel the anger rising, but she knew she couldn't give in to it. Not now. The flight attendant didn't realize it yet, but Zara wasn't just another passenger. Zara was someone who had more than just a seat in first class. She had power, the power to change everything. In moments of extreme pressure, do you rise to defend yourself or choose to remain calm for the greater good? What would you do in Zara's position? The tension in the cabin lingered like a thick fog. Zara sat with her baby still nestled in her arms, the soft, rhythmic breathing of her child, providing a momentary calm in the chaos that had just unfolded. Passengers whispered amongst themselves, some still exchanging nervous glances, others relieved that the baby was safe. But the air felt heavy to Zara, like something more was about to happen. She couldn't shake the feeling that today wasn't over, that the challenges she had just faced were only a prelude to something worse. She glanced out the window, the sky now a pale blue, the plane soaring high above the clouds, and then her thoughts drifted back. Earlier that morning, before the flight even began, her mother-in-law's words echoed in her mind. "Zara, remember, safety comes first. Always keep your peace, my child, no matter what the world throws at you. The world can be cruel, but your strength will always see you through. I pray for peace for you and the baby today, that no harm shall come your way." Zara's mother-in-law, a woman of strength and wisdom, had always been a source of solace. In the midst of her busy, often stressful life, those words had always stayed with her. Zara remembered the tenderness in her voice, the concern, and how she had placed her hands gently on Zara's shoulders before Zara left for the airport that morning. "May peace go with you, and may your strength be greater than any obstacle you face." Zara had smiled, feeling the weight of her mother-in-law's prayers, but that calm moment felt so distant now. In this moment, Zara knew her strength had been tested beyond measure, but could it hold up to what was coming? Her thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a voice, a familiar one, but now laden with authority. The chief flight attendant approached, her face cold, her stance rigid. Zara's eyes narrowed. This woman had a presence, one that was designed to impose control over her passengers, but Zara wasn't about to back down, not now. The chief flight attendant cast a quick, dismissive glance at Zara's baby, who had finally settled down, and then turned her eyes back on Zara. She looked over the scene with judgmental eyes, as if Zara and her baby were the cause of the inconvenience. Without a word, the woman stood before her, blocking the aisle. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" Her voice was sharp, the edge of authority tinged with something darker, disdain. It didn't escape Zara's notice. The first flight attendant, who had been kind and had helped stabilize the situation, glanced between the two women, her brow furrowed. She spoke quietly, but firmly. "She's fine now. Her baby had a medical emergency, but it's been resolved." The chief flight attendant's eyes flicked to the first attendant, dismissing her with a cold glance, before settling back on Zara. "Move her back to economy. She's causing a scene." Zara could feel her pulse quicken. The words, the tone, hit her like a slap. She had not only been humiliated, but now this woman, with her air of superiority, was about to escalate everything. Zara stood up slowly, her baby in her arms, as the first attendant, looking embarrassed, stepped aside. But before she could speak, a voice from across the aisle broke the silence. A white passenger, seated several rows ahead, had been watching the entire interaction. His face twisted with disgust, his lips curling into a sneer. "You can't be serious." His voice cut through the tension in the cabin. "This woman doesn't belong in first class. Her baby's disgusting." Zara's blood ran cold, the racism in his words hanging in the air. The chief flight attendant turned to him, almost instantly siding with the passenger. "Please, sir, don't worry. I'll handle it." Her tone was just as dismissive as before, as if Zara's very presence was an inconvenience to be eliminated. Zara took a deep breath. She could feel the eyes of the entire cabin on her now, her very existence under scrutiny. This wasn't just about her baby. It was about her place in this world. The tension was building. Zara felt the weight of the situation settle over her, the need to stand firm, to assert her power. But that power wasn't just going to come from raising her voice. It was in the calm strength she had shown earlier. It was the quiet confidence her husband had instilled in her, both through his medical training and through his unwavering belief in her. But this wasn't just about her child anymore. This was about justice. Just as she was about to speak, the chief flight attendant's face twisted in contempt. She stepped forward, her hand rising to the air in an aggressive motion that caught Zara off guard. In one swift motion, the flight attendant slapped Zara across the face. The sound was sharp and brutal, the slap echoing through the cabin, a loud slap of authority and humiliation. The gasps of passengers filled the air as Zara's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning with the sting of the slap. The room seemed to freeze. A few passengers whispered in shock, but most were too stunned to react. Zara's world went still for a moment. The chief flight attendant, her eyes wide with surprise at what she had just done, stood frozen. The slap. Max didn't waste any time. "I know, I'm already handling it. I'm going to need you to act fast. This isn't just a PR crisis. It's a systemic issue that has to be addressed." There was a pause on the other end of the line. The weight of what was happening seemed to settle in. "Max, I'm deeply sorry. I know this situation should have never happened. Your family should never have had to go through something like this." Max's mind was already several steps ahead. "It's not just about my family. It's about the people this has happened to before Zara. This woman, the chief flight attendant, she's been doing this for a long time, hasn't she?" The owner sighed. "I've heard rumors, Max, but I didn't know it was this bad. Let me make some calls. I'll get our legal team on it immediately." Max's thoughts were a blur as he tried to focus. Zara's strength, her ability to face adversity head-on, had always been something he admired. He wanted to be there with her, but he couldn't afford to let his emotions take over. Zara had made her stand. and now it was his turn to make his. "I want a full background check on the chief flight attendant." Max's voice was firm, commanding. "I need everything you can find on her. Complaints, reports, anything that will expose her history. If this is systemic, I need to know. We'll get it done right now." The owner's voice was urgent, but Max could hear the regret in his tone. The airline had failed its passengers, and it had failed Zara. Max ended the call, a sense of resolve settling over him. The next step was clear. He wasn't going to let this incident pass unnoticed. The damage had been done, but he would use it as fuel for change. Max immediately got to work, starting with the legal team. Within the hour, he had gathered everyone in a video conference. The team sat in front of their computers, listening intently as Max laid out the plan. "We're going to make this right." His voice was calm, but the undercurrent of authority was unmistakable. "First, I need a full investigation into the chief flight attendant. We're looking at every report, every complaint. If she's been a problem before, we need to know." Max listened as his legal counsel began their research. Minutes later, they reported back with a troubling discovery. The chief flight attendant had a long history of passenger complaints, many of them citing inappropriate behavior, racist comments, and poor customer service. There were also a few incidents where passengers had filed formal complaints about her dismissive attitude and rude conduct. Max ran a hand over his face. This wasn't just about the slap or the words spoken on that flight. This was about a deeper, more entrenched problem within the airline. A culture of unchecked power that had allowed employees like this to mistreat passengers without facing the consequences. "Get me a full report. I want this on the record." Max's voice was unyielding. "We can't let this go any longer." The airline owner contacted Max again shortly after the initial findings were compiled. The tone was somber but determined. "Max, I've spoken to the board. We're ready to take full responsibility." The owner's voice was steady, but there was a clear sense of shame in his words. "I want to publicly apologize for what happened. It's unacceptable, and we'll make sure it doesn't happen again." Max nodded. Zara had been right to trust him. Now it was time for the airline to show that it wasn't just a company of profits, but a company that could stand for justice. "We'll do it together," Max said, his voice unwavering. "I'm making this personal. This is about more than just one passenger or one incident. This is about the change that has to happen across the company. This isn't just about correcting a wrong, it's about re-educating everyone. Staff, passengers, and management." Max didn't waste any time. "I know, I'm already handling it. I'm going to need you to act fast. This isn't just a PR crisis. It's a systemic issue that has to be addressed." There was a pause on the other end of the line. The weight of what was happening seemed to settle in. "Max, I'm deeply sorry. I know this situation should have never happened. Your family should never have had to go through something like this." Max's mind was already several steps ahead. "It's not just about my family. It's about the people this has happened to before Zara. This woman, the chief flight attendant, she's been doing this for a long time, hasn't she?" The owner sighed. "I've heard rumors, Max, but I didn't know it was this bad. Let me make some calls. I'll get our legal team on it immediately." Max's thoughts were a blur as he tried to focus. Zara's strength, her ability to face adversity head-on, had always been something he admired. He wanted to be there with her, but he couldn't afford to let his emotions take over. Zara had made her stand, and now it was his turn to make his. "I want a full background check on the chief flight attendant." Max's voice was firm, commanding. "I need everything you can find on her. Complaints, reports, anything that will expose her history. If this is systemic, I need to know. We'll get it done right now." The owner's voice was urgent, but Max could hear the regret in his tone. The airline had failed its passengers, and it had failed Zara. Max ended the call, a sense of resolve settling over him. The next step was clear. He wasn't going to let this incident pass unnoticed. The damage had been done, but he would use it as fuel for change. Max immediately got to work, starting with the legal team. Within the hour, he had gathered everyone in a video conference. The team sat in front of their computers, listening intently as Max laid out the plan. "We're going to make this right." His voice was calm, but the undercurrent of authority was unmistakable. "First, I need a full investigation into the chief flight attendant. We're looking at every report, every complaint. If she's been a problem before, we need to know." Max listened as his legal counsel began their research. Minutes later, they reported back with a troubling discovery. The chief flight attendant had a long history of passenger complaints, many of them citing inappropriate behavior, racist comments, and poor customer service. There were also a few incidents where passengers had filed formal complaints about her dismissive attitude and rude conduct. Max ran a hand over his face. This wasn't just about the slap or the words spoken on that flight. This was about a deeper, more entrenched problem within the airline. A culture of unchecked power that had allowed employees like this to mistreat passengers without facing the consequences. "Get me a full report. I want this on the record." Max's voice was unyielding. "We can't let this go any longer." The airline owner contacted Max again shortly after the initial findings were compiled. The tone was somber but determined. "Max, I've spoken to the board. We're ready to take full responsibility." The owner's voice was steady, but there was a clear sense of shame in his words. "I want to publicly apologize for what happened. It's unacceptable, and we'll make sure it doesn't happen again." Max nodded. Zara had been right to trust him. Now it was time for the airline to show that it wasn't just a company of profits, but a company that could stand for justice. "We'll do it together," Max said, his voice unwavering. "I'm making this personal. This is about more than just one passenger or one incident. This is about the change that has to happen across the company. This isn't just about correcting a wrong, it's about re-educating everyone, staff, passengers, and management." The owner's response was quick and decisive. "I'll have a public statement drafted immediately. We'll get this out in the next few hours. We will make it clear that we're not going to stand for this anymore." Max's heart swelled with a mix of pride and anger. This was it. The airline was going to change, and Zara's actions had started the revolution. The investigation into the chief flight attendant had only just begun, but the public statement went live within hours, promising accountability and reform. Max was on top of everything, working behind the scenes to ensure that the legal and public relations teams took immediate action. As Max sat in his office, his phone buzzed again. It was a message from Zara. He clicked on it, his eyes scanning the words quickly. "Max, they're escalating this. I need you here. I'm ready for whatever comes next." Max stood up, grabbing his coat. This wasn't over. The fallout from this incident would be far-reaching, but Zara had given him the strength to carry it through. He wasn't just handling this. He was making a stand for everything he believed in. He picked up the phone one last time, calling the owner to finalize the statement. "Zara, I'm seeing it. I'm on it. Stay calm." Her heart skipped a beat as her phone rang. It was her husband, Max. Zara had to tell him this couldn't be ignored. As her fingers trembled slightly, she answered the call, speaking quickly. "Max, they're escalating. They want me moved. The chief flight attendant's involved now, and the passengers." Before she could finish, she heard the unmistakable sound of her husband's voice, laced with urgency, but also calm strength. "I'm already aware of what's happening. Stay calm. I'll handle this." The tension in the cabin reached its peak. Zara's phone buzzed again, this time with a flood of notifications. She glanced at the screen and saw that the video from the flight was spreading like wildfire. The whole ordeal, the slap, the racial remarks, the chaos, was now captured for the world to see. Comments flooded in, some in support, others criticizing her. The whispers and stares from passengers around her grew louder, their discomfort now amplified by the attention from social media. Zara could feel the weight of their judgment, the way they were staring at her as if she had done something wrong. But what hit her hardest was the growing realization that this wasn't just about her. The video had already gone beyond the confines of the airplane. It was public now, out there for everyone to comment on, to judge. The digital age had turned her personal nightmare into a public spectacle. Her fingers trembled as she swiped through the video, her heart sinking as she saw Max's name pop up on her screen. He had seen the video. He had already been alerted. She quickly hit the call button, and in the quiet hum of the cabin, Zara held her breath as it rang. "Zara, I'm seeing it. I'm on it. Stay calm." Max's voice was cool, calm, controlled, but Zara could hear the urgency in his tone. He didn't have to say much more. He was already on his way to taking action. Zara knew this moment would change everything. She wasn't just the wife of an influential man anymore. She was a symbol of the very thing that had caused the outrage. The chief flight attendant, standing by with a look of disdain on her face, turned away from Zara, speaking quietly to another colleague. Zara could feel her eyes on her, a judgment that felt suffocating. She knew the woman's intentions weren't to help. The flight attendant didn't see Zara as a person. She saw her as a problem to be dealt with. As Zara continued to breathe through the rising tension, the racist white passenger who had started it all stood up again, this time approaching the chief flight attendant. His face was twisted with anger, his posture rigid as he pointed toward Zara. "She's causing trouble." His voice was low but venomous, and everyone around them went silent. This whole scene was unacceptable. Why is she still in first class? She doesn't belong here. The chief flight attendant nodded stiffly, her lips pressing into a thin line. Zara could see the power shift, the way she instantly sided with the passenger. It was clear now. Zara wasn't just being judged for her actions, she was being judged for who she was. Zara's fingers tightened around her phone, still buzzing with messages. The video had gone viral, and now it was clear more than ever that the incident wasn't going to fade quietly into the background. Her husband would be pulled into this, the airline would be forced to take sides, and the public would demand answers. Max's next words were short, direct, and cutting through the static of the airline's clamor. "Don't let this escalate. I'm taking control. Trust me." But Zara didn't trust that it would just disappear. She had to stand up, not just for herself, but for the other passengers who had witnessed the injustice, for the people out there who had already taken sides. It wasn't just about her baby anymore. It was about exposing the broken system she had been quietly enduring for so long. Zara closed her eyes briefly, trying to calm the storm inside her mind. And then she remembered. Her mother-in-law's words had stayed with her for a reason. They weren't just a prayer for safety. They were a reminder of how far Zara had come, and the strength she had inside her. "Zara, remember, safety comes first. Always keep your peace, my child, no matter what the world throws at you. The world can be cruel, but your strength will always see you through. I pray for peace for you and the baby today, that no harm shall come your way." Zara opened her eyes, and for the first time in what felt like hours, she felt calm. Her mother-in-law's voice was a balm, grounding her in a way nothing else could. She wasn't just a mother, she was someone who had overcome challenges before. She had faced prejudice, judgment, and worse in her life, and she had survived. This wasn't the first time Zara had encountered racism, and it wouldn't be the last. But this was the moment she had to fight for what was right. It wasn't just about getting justice for her baby. It was about changing the system that perpetuated this kind of discrimination. This was her moment. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it wasn't a text or message. A video clip, this time from a different angle, popped up on her screen. She clicked on it and saw a much clearer view of the incident. The slap, the racial remarks, the disgust in the racist passenger's eyes. She watched it a few times, and as the video finished, it hit her. This video would change everything. The chief flight attendant stood still as she watched Zara. Zara knew that she had only one chance to handle this with dignity and strength. She stood up slowly, holding her baby close to her chest. The entire first-class section seemed to hold its breath. "I am not just a passenger here." Zara's voice rang out, calm and steady, but with a sharp edge that made the chief flight attendant stiffen. "I am someone who has a right to be in this seat just as much as anyone else." The racist passenger sneered and muttered under his breath, but Zara didn't take her eyes off the chief flight attendant. "And if you choose to escalate this any further, you will answer to me, and my husband." The words hung in the air, thick with tension. The room had fallen into an uneasy silence. The flight attendants looked between Zara and the chief flight attendant, some passengers glancing nervously from one to the other. Zara stood tall now, her calm resolve like a shield, protecting her and her baby from the storm of judgment and prejudice surrounding her. Zara could feel the heat rising from the passengers around her. Some were sympathetic, their eyes filled with concern. Others were disapproving, their glances sharp with disdain. The tension in the air was palpable. Her baby's small whimpers had subsided, but his distress was still evident in the way he clung to her, his little fists clenched. His crying had become quieter, but Zara knew it was a sign of the trauma he had faced, both emotional and physical. The chief flight attendant narrowed her eyes, clearly not expecting this shift in power. "You'll have to explain that to the captain, not me." Her voice was sharp, trying to maintain some semblance of authority. But Zara wasn't intimidated. She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was more than that. Zara could see the realization dawning on the flight attendant, the shift in the power dynamic. Her husband, Max, was second in command of the entire airline. Zara had seen this play out before, in meetings, in boardrooms. The moment of recognition had set the foundation for what was about to unfold. The chief flight attendant took a step back, her face betraying the slightest flicker of doubt. She'd been used to controlling every situation in the cabin with a well-practiced air of superiority. But here, in this moment, Zara had turned the tables. Zara stood silently for a moment, holding her baby close to her chest. The stillness between them was interrupted only by the sound of her baby's breathing. Her chest tightened as the tension in the cabin deepened. Zara's eyes never left the chief flight attendant, a silent challenge hanging in the air. Zara knew it wasn't just about her right to sit in first class. It was about reclaiming her dignity, fighting back against the system, and showing those who thought they were untouchable that they were wrong. Max's influence wasn't just about power, it was about exposing the cracks in a system built on prejudice. This was her fight now, and she wasn't backing down. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Max, but not just any message. It was a link to a viral video of the incident. Her stomach dropped as she clicked on the link. The footage was clear, the slap, the disgusted comments, the escalating tension. It was all captured. And now the world was seeing it. The video was being shared widely, with thousands of viewers commenting on the situation. Zara could feel the digital eyes of the world watching her. The video had exposed not only her humiliation, but the underlying racism that had fueled this entire ordeal. Zara couldn't help but wonder how many others had faced this same treatment, silently enduring while the world looked away. How many had kept quiet because they didn't have the strength to speak out? 14:53. Her grip on her phone tightened. This was her moment. It wasn't just about surviving the flight anymore. It was about changing the conversation, about forcing the airline to confront its systemic issues. Her husband's influence would undoubtedly ensure action, but it was her strength and resolve that would lead this charge. As the cabin grew more tense, Zara stood firm, her baby still resting against her chest. The chief flight attendant and the racist passenger had nothing left to say, but Zara could feel the shift, the moment when they realized they had underestimated her. Max called again, his voice steady, but laced with urgency. "Zara, it's time. I'm taking action now. I've already spoken to the captain. They're calling a meeting with the airline's legal team. I need you to stay calm and let me handle this from here on." The relief in Zara's chest was palpable, but the anger didn't fade. She wasn't done. She had to take control of the narrative to ensure that the airline knew that this would not go unnoticed, that the systemic racism and discrimination faced by passengers like her would no longer be swept under the rug. Max's voice carried the weight of the airline's power structure, but it was Zara's courage and her ability to remain calm under extreme pressure that had set the wheels of change in motion. Zara turned her attention back to the chief flight attendant. The woman stood there, attempting to recover her composure, but the shift in the atmosphere was undeniable. The other passengers were beginning to murmur, some whispering about the video, some visibly uncomfortable. But Zara didn't flinch. Her body was tense, but her voice remained calm, unwavering. "I've had enough of this." Zara's words cut through the air like a blade. "This ends now. You want to escalate it? Fine. I'll let the world know what's happening here." The chief flight attendant's eyes flashed with frustration, but she couldn't deny the shift in the tide. Zara wasn't just any passenger. She was a woman who had learned to fight back, to hold her ground when everyone around her expected her to fall. She wasn't going anywhere. Max's influence had already set the course for the fallout. The legal team at the airline was already on the line, and a public statement was being prepared. But for Zara, this wasn't about just exposing the truth. It was about changing the system that allowed discrimination to go unchecked. Zara didn't give the chief flight attendant a chance to speak. The room had fallen silent again, every passenger now waiting for what Zara would do next. The passengers' whispers grew louder, mixed with supportive murmurs and those still hesitant to speak up. She stood there, her baby calm and nestled against her, and delivered the words that would change everything. "I'm Zara Marx." The room held its breath. "And I'm the wife of Max Morris, the head of the airline staff." Zara's words cut through the air like a blade, shifting the power dynamic in a heartbeat. The chief flight attendant's face drained of color, her previously confident posture faltering. The racist passenger, who had been spouting venomous words just moments before, now looked confused, his face flush with embarrassment. He glanced at the flight attendants, unsure of what to do with the situation now that the woman he had derided was revealed to be someone of immense power. The ripple effect of Zara's revelation was immediate. The video was already circulating online, and now Zara's true identity had become the center of the storm. The public's fury mounted as the chief flight attendant stood there, powerless, exposed as the symbol of an airline culture rooted in discrimination. Zara stood strong, her head held high. The next step was clear: action. The situation was far from over, but Zara knew that Max was already mobilizing the airline's response. This was no longer about a personal vendetta or a single incident. This was about the airline facing its systemic issues head-on. As Zara stood there, the weight of the situation was no longer just about her baby, or the racist passenger, or even the flight attendants. The eyes of the world were on her, and she knew what she had started was something much bigger than a fight for one woman's dignity. The chief flight attendant stood frozen, her eyes darting nervously between Zara and the passengers, her previously authoritative stance now crumbling. The racist passenger, who had dared to voice his hatred, now appeared smaller, caught in the web of his own prejudice. Zara had exposed not only the flight attendant's bias, but the underlying system that allowed these actions to thrive in silence. Max's voice came through loud and clear in Zara's ear, even as the tension in the cabin grew thick with anticipation. "I've already called the board. They're reviewing the video. The press is about to be involved. Stay calm, and we will handle it from here." The ripple effect of Zara's identity reveal was immediate. The video was no longer just a viral sensation. It was the start of a movement. Across social media, the public outrage continued to grow as people began to speak out against the airline's practices. Zara knew that this wasn't just about her moment of justice. This was about accountability, reform, and the beginning of change. As the plane descended, the air seemed thick with tension. Passengers whispered amongst themselves, some glancing nervously at Zara and others offering her faint but appreciative smiles. The sound of the plane's wheels touching the tarmac felt like a release. But there was no escaping the fact that the world was about to know about the incident and that the fallout had only just begun. As the flight taxied to the gate, passengers in first class were still talking quietly among themselves, exchanging their thoughts on what had just occurred. Many commented on Zara's bravery, some with admiration, others with genuine surprise at the shocking nature of the flight attendant's behavior. "I can't believe what I just saw. She just stood there, didn't back down. That's real courage." "Yeah, and she saved her baby. I would have been in full-blown panic mode, but she just stayed calm. She's a hero in my book. We need more people like her standing up for what's right." A few passengers even applauded Zara as she walked down the aisle, some raising their glasses in silent acknowledgement. A sense of respect permeated the cabin, even as the chief flight attendant and the racist passenger stood silently, caught in the aftermath. Once the plane had landed, the tension in the air didn't subside. The airline acted swiftly, convening an emergency panel of senior executives and legal counsel. The chief flight attendant was immediately summoned for questioning, as were other crew members who had been present during the incident. The video of the slap and the racist remarks spread like wildfire, reaching the ears of those in charge before the flight even touched down. By the time the panel convened, the evidence was damning. The chief flight attendant was unable to justify her actions in any way. Despite her attempts to claim stress and pressure as factors for her behavior, the panel could see that the real issue was the systemic racism embedded in the airline's culture. The panel's decision came swiftly. The chief flight attendant was placed on immediate administrative leave. Zara's identity, now widely known, had forced the airline to confront the kind of discriminatory behavior that had been tolerated and even ignored for years. As Zara stepped off the plane, she could feel the eyes of the flight crew and passengers still following her. A young flight attendant who had witnessed the entire altercation came up to her, his expression one of sympathy and respect. "I just wanted to say thank you." His voice was soft but sincere. "You handled that situation with so much grace." Zara nodded, feeling a slight weight lift from her chest. "Thank you for your help earlier. You're the reason my baby's safe." The young attendant smiled. "I just did what anyone would have done." But Zara could see it in his eyes. He was proud to have been part of the moment. One evening, after a particularly productive meeting with the board of directors, Zara stood on the balcony of her home, looking out at the city lights. She could feel the peace her mother-in-law had prayed for that morning, the sense of calm that had eluded her in the past. Her baby, now several months older, giggled softly in her arms. She kissed his forehead, whispering, "You'll never know the fear I felt that day. You'll only know that your mother fought for you, and for so many others." Her phone buzzed with a message from Max. "You did it! We did it! This is just the beginning." Zara smiled, finally allowing herself to exhale. She wasn't done yet, but for the first time in a long time she felt like she could breathe. She had found her strength, and in doing so, she had helped the airline begin its long journey toward reform. She wasn't just a passenger on that flight anymore. She was a change agent, a woman who had taken control of her destiny and made sure her voice was heard. And that was the greatest victory of all. Have you ever fought for something bigger than yourself? What's the most important lesson you've learned from standing up for what's right? Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's just as crazy and even more intriguing than you can imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. Save it up.